Yeah, I mean, Steffi said it, there are three smart men on the stage.
Plus you.
Plus me. I'm the moderator. So you have here on stage two totally confused investors, that's Christian and me, and then two entrepreneurs in AI with two very, very different approaches. Just heard you, but Jonas, maybe if you want to give a 1-minute version on how you, who you are, and then Adam, you as well. I think Christian needs no introduction. He runs Burda Principal Investments, but I think the two entrepreneurs.
So I can tell you I'm as confused as you probably. We're at Aleph Alpha, we're doing fundamental AI R&D, but we're also bringing it into production. So we're partnering with companies that own the most critical and complex use cases and make sure AI is trustworthy and safe and sovereign. And we're do our own research. The explainability you've seen is research from our team. Multimodality, we invented that 2 years before Microsoft. That's about what we do. Similar to OpenAI, if you want to dumb it down to like one sentence, it's like somewhat like OpenAI.
Okay. Maybe I'll start with dumb it down to one sentence first and then get into the details. So basically, I used to work at Google Translate, and ModelFront predicts if Google Translate is wrong. Okay, so what's the value of that? Basically, when you take big companies, doesn't matter whether it's e-com or enterprises, car companies doing their technical docs, when they say human translation today, which they still buy a ton of, they basically first machine translate and then send it all to humans. And this has actually been going on this way for like 5 or 10 years, in some cases even 20 years if you go to like Sun in Silicon Valley. And principally started like 2016 with the transformer. The T in GPT came out of translation, my old team actually, and machine translation got very good, similar to what we're seeing with GPT now, and this just became the default way where you're seeing like, hey, 90% of the segments, 90% of the sentences are perfectly translated. So that's what we do in a nutshell, is to help them skip humans for as much content as they safely can.
Good. I mean, we have heard today like a good model to think through the value chain is, I mean, we've heard a couple of times, you have the infrastructure layer, you have the large models, and you have many different applications. And the theme of this panel is a generative AI feature or business, and I would dub it differently. So how can Christian and I make money on AI? So we have invested in both those firms, but maybe let's start with you, Jonas. I mean, you've picked the craziest thing one could do is to compete against the most hyped business in the world, OpenAI. How do you feel?
in between excited and stressed out. So when we started, it wasn't like that. We started in 2019 when I left Apple, and the first language model we built, this was even before GPT-3 was out. So we're a little bit surprised by now that this is on the list of, like, the first item list of every big company in the world. Right? And we're directly competing with the likes of Microsoft and Google. And of course, this is in a way what I expected. This is why I kind of built this company, but I'm still kind of somewhat surprised. And I think most people currently agree that this is an industrial revolution. And this will fundamentally change how we process, how we interact with machines, how we process information. All of knowledge work might be similarly changed like physical work has been in other industrial revolutions. But when you even like looking at other industrial revolutions, this is not obvious how to earn money with that. Right? I mean, the AI R&D work we're doing is phenomenal and have gotten us a lot of visibility, but it is not always easy to directly translate that into profit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're now 3 years in. You have like the last 12 months were probably faster than you expected. But how do you think long term? I mean, investors would ask you, how can you compete and how can you long term differentiate?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the most important ingredient is putting the technology into work. Like, we don't need subsidies or great panels or handshakes or photos with the chancellor. This is all great, don't get me wrong. Well, what eventually will be a necessary ingredient for our success is if we can, together with our partners, because even if we raise $1 billion now, we will not be in a position to do this by ourselves. So we need strong partners, we need industry partners. Some of them have already been announced, more will come. And this is also how we're aligning our strategy. We're saying that we're not a monopoly player, we can't, right? Like even if we wanted to, like we don't. But our goal is to give the world's best enterprises and governments give sovereign AI technology that they can run on premise, that they can kind of validate themselves, they have explainable, they can own their own value creation. And this is a different strategy from what some other players are running, and this is what makes us interesting for world's best enterprises. And so if it works, which is not 100% guarantee, but if it works, it only works by everybody working together and by us being the technology provider. But in an industrial revolution, really everyone's existence is at stake.
I mean, Adam, you have been around with your business far before this last 12 months. You had this, visible rise of generative AI. How has that changed your business or your perception or your investor interest, or has anything changed?
Yeah, so I would say from a technology perspective, in our field, we were sort of already there, and now this has spread to these other areas. So not that much changed from a technology perspective, although we do pull in the latest generation stuff under the hood. But our customers are non-technical, and so probably our biggest challenge was just the fact that, organizational inertia, this is for big companies, they're very slow. And if nothing forces them to change, they will not change, right? Linguists are more almost adjacent to content writers. My sense is content, this audience knows content, right? And so it's very adjacent kind of space, yeah, and they don't like technology. They were people who hated math in school, right? And so what happened now is, somebody above them even is coming and saying, hey, my son just tried ChatGPT, it's awesome, like, can we just fire everybody, right? Scary stuff like that, and not just inside companies, but also inside international organizations. So you have that, plus this, I don't want to say bad economy, but weird economy, that we're in. Those two kind of pressures, push them, but there's no rational reason why they should be doing this now and shouldn't have been doing it 1 year ago, other than, sort of trends, let's call it.
The Jonas, first of all, as we all know, math is totally useless, so thanks for flagging that again. But Jonas is a very broad, totally horizontal approach. I think you are as vertical, as niche as it gets. Do you feel safer?
I don't see that there is a right and a wrong on that, because you've seen both examples. I used to, before Google Translate, I worked in Android 2009 or so, right? And now there's 4 billion people using an Android phone. I was in the Play Store specifically, which is the platform, right, where, okay, we said, we're not going to do everything, so we'd have to have apps from other people. And then you have an app. Facebook is one of those apps, right? Most of their users are on mobile, and most mobile users are on Android, right? So just that Android. So, and I don't see it as an either or. Was Android a good idea? Yes. Was Facebook a good idea? Yes. Right. So they're not bothering each other. So I see it as extremely specific. In our case, the world doesn't need another translation management system. The world doesn't need another translation agency. The world does not even need another machine translation provider like Google or Microsoft.
Now maybe switching to the investor perspective now for a second. 2-3 years ago here in this conference, we would rather discuss 10-minute a supermarket delivery business. So e-scooters now, 2 years later, every investor is of course investing in AI. And how did it feel for you, Adam? Do you feel that you suddenly have many more conversations than previously?
Well, you guys invested in us before it was cool. So actually, and we're not raising right now. So we're just focused on the customers, and so I'm happy for the buzz that it creates with the customers. But I don't actually have any idea what's going on in the investment world.
Christian, now you and me in the same boat, right? Suddenly there's so much going on. How do you and your team, how do you organize all of this, and how do you look at this opportunity from an investor perspective?
Yeah, it's a massive opportunity, and I think we heard it yesterday and today multiple times that every enterprise needs an AI strategy, and that means if it's every company, every enterprise in any vertical, this describes how massive this opportunity is. So we are looking at all three layers. So the infrastructure layer, the foundation layer, but also the application layer. I think it's and it's obviously very difficult to figure out which companies will in the end succeed. So the team, I think we are backing is very important. It's probably more important than ever. So and then apart from that, obviously things are developing so rapidly. I mean, in 2018, 2019, we had portfolio days with our portfolio companies, and we did AI workshops. But at that point in time, it was more a feature, right? So you were actually discussing how can you use AI to propel your business. And now, AI is obviously, you have massive companies emerging out of the AI technology. So this is, it's fascinating, and at the same time, obviously, also you have to be on your toes.
But maybe let's double on this for a second. So I think what is clear that on the lowest level would have been very good to invest into chips and into cloud. We both didn't, so that's
Yes.
that's
We
too
missed
late.
the infrastructure.
Then on basically Jonas level, right now what we can see, at least some of those labs get sold, right? So you had the InstaDeep exit to BeyondTech, you had of course DeepMind to Google that we heard before, but I mean, do we think that on that level there's like long-term businesses? I mean, in the last wave of the consumer internet were huge companies. Now there's a case to be made that maybe it's for the first time that really the incumbents are actually really in a better position. So do we, I mean, maybe before we go to the application, do we think that there's really a long-term, I mean, Jonas already touched the defensibility, but I mean, multiple opinions. Huh?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in the past, people, when companies basically had strategic investors early in the cap table, it was rather negative. Right, in this new wave of AI investments, many sort of, in particular on the foundation model side, companies decided to take on strategic investors very early and see this as a competitive advantage. So OpenAI, obviously, with Microsoft being a very prominent example, but still, I think there's room for everyone, and these businesses have to get out of the gate. And I think for us as venture capitalists, getting these businesses out of the gate, I think that's certainly still our turf.
I mean, you touched it, Jonas, you already mentioned it, so I feel I'm allowed to ask. So the deal that you announced a couple of weeks ago, so can you tell us why you took those strategics? So there were a couple of names out there, so can you maybe tell us a bit, this big deal in the southwest of Germany, what exactly happened?
So some of the stuff that you may have been reading were rumors. So don't trust everything you read on the press. Generally speaking, what we are doing is, and I'm super happy about this, so there's kind of two rules for me. One is we need to have the right partners and enough dry gunpowder to give us a shot at this. Right? And this kind of introduces a lower bound on the money side of things. And the other was that we were completely oversubscribed. Of course, it's a boom, right? Everybody wants to get in. And what was really important for me is to only find partners that we are very confident can contribute meaningfully to the business side of things. Because this is where the battle will be won. The battle will not be won on raising more money, but on finding the right partners to put this technology into production and solve real-world problems, so valuable problems. That's why SAP, for example, this was not a rumor. This is out there, and SAP is very close to some of the most valuable processes that we have in our industry, and much more valuable than kind of some chatbots, or much more valuable than doing your kids' homeworks. And so I think these kind of partnerships we're building, and I'm happy to also be in a position where I can make sure that the equity upside also goes to the partners I love working with and that can make a big difference.
Like many of those partners were actually, like in your early rounds, it was, I think, purely German investors up until, I think, Series A.
Yeah.
And now also the current partner is very much of a German angle. So how important, like in the long-term positioning, how important is this national argument? I mean, you have the same thing in France with Mistral, I think apparently Monsieur Macron was very close to it. You've mentioned that the Chancellor is also close to what you do. So how important is it, like in 5 years, is the German pitch still valid?
I mean, that's always a balance. So I've never seen this as a German startup. I've always seen this as a European mission. But of course, the fact that we are well connected in Germany and that I was able to attend the Kabinettsklausur and so things like that, these things help. So we are doing this in parallel. We are leveraging the German ecosystem. There's so many phenomenal enterprises in Germany. There's so much brain, there's so much ambition in Germany with our universities, with our enterprises, and of course government also wants to move. Let's see if they'll succeed doing that. But at the very same time, we're also building international partnerships. One of them is HPE. Right? So with HPE, we're moving fast in the US because what we can offer, transparency, sovereignty, is also critical for some of the biggest players in the US. And so we're not stopping at the German border. I see the mission being like European sovereignty, but we're working with one of the biggest US banks. They worry about their sovereignty as much as we worry, like from a German perspective, right? Because they also know there's big tech players, they want to own all their data, they want to own all their value creation, and then they will not be able to capture a lot of value if that happens.
Mm-hmm. Now let's move one level up to the very concrete applications. I think if I had known what you do, I would probably still be puzzled about what exactly does ModelFront do. Maybe it was very helpful when you maybe explained, so you mentioned he was in translation almost all of his business life, but how exactly, like give us this concrete example of your very business model.
Okay, so if I'm a big company, typically in the US, we at least $10 billion in revenue company, and I want to, at this point, I want to go to international markets. I got all my marketing content, my technical docs, etc., to be in those markets. I'm going to basically hook up what's called the translation management system to my content management system. It's going to suck over that stuff. It's going to call, in the old world, would call Google or Microsoft or whatever, and then send it to translation agencies. And it's about $1 a sentence to get those looked at. And so now with ModelFront, those end buyers, right, the companies who want their content translated, get us integrated in that translation management system. So they ask them to, or they do it unilaterally, or we do it unilaterally. But one way or another, we got to be in that relatively unsexy piece of workflow management software. And then what we do is very, very small, right? It's just an API. They don't see anything, but it's going in there and kind of doing the work for them, a big portion of the work for them, before they start. Right? So basically saying this sentence was good, and that they already, it's kind of weird, right? Does that really help me if half the sentences are now kind of grayed out or something? The thing is, they've already had that paradigm for the last 20 years because they already, about 20 years ago, settled on a very simple piece of technology, from my perspective, simple piece of technology called the translation memory, which also came out of Germany, actually, Jochen Hummel in Berlin, which said, if we've already paid for human translation of the sentence, we're not paying again. So they're already used to kind of scanning and going to the sentence that needs work, then going down to the next one. So this just increases the number of sentences that are like that are already done. And the good thing about that is that from the buyer's perspective, this is a little bit controversial, right? But from the buyer's perspective means they don't have to have a conversation with the human translators about this new thing. Right, because that gets very political very, very fast.
And do you feel that somebody now, given this, that the access to generative AI has become so much easier, do you feel that it's easier for somebody else to do the same, or is it really so protected from what you've built so far?
It's certainly easier, and it will always get easier. And we're going to keep adding more things, right? So I hope that they're always playing catch up. But I came from this AI background, right? Google research and all of this. And for me, the hard part was the industry, right? You're going to this very unsexy industry, or even if it's like the translation department of Google, the way they tick is different, right? They're not engineers. And having to learn all these systems, these partnerships, and all of this stuff around it, what people actually need is quite different than your average guy inside of Microsoft Translator or Google Translate would imagine. And so I see it getting very fragmented. Like there's got to be 10,000 other such enterprise workflows in insurance, in content creation, et cetera. And each one of them requires like a product that is very tailored to the actual needs of this team. So even if the underlying model were the same, right? Even if we're running on Aleph Alpha, for example, right? Like they cannot digest Aleph Alpha.
Well, Christian, I mean, now you've been investing for many, many years. So what is now this new theme that's so big? So what changes did you have to make to your investment team? Like suddenly there's a whole new technical angle next to commercial angle is always very important, but now you have this very technical angle that somebody needs to assess. How do you organize yourself?
Yeah, I think you need a broad network of experts as well, right? So we have been partnering with the Technical University Munich early on. They helped us a lot in actually understanding the technology. You need to, we have other sort of experts, and then it's obviously also a fast-moving environment, right? So you meet other people, you have additions to the team, and I guess the biggest challenge, I think we have as investors is figuring out, in particular on the application layer, what is actually a business and what is just a feature, right? Because with some of the emerging generative AI stuff or apps or whatever is just a feature, right? And it will never be a business. And I guess this is sort of for us as investors, the biggest challenge to really figure out what's a long-lasting business and what is just an add-on.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it says 45 seconds, so maybe one last statement from each of you, like Jonas, if you wouldn't be running, if you were jobless today, what other business or thing would you do if not the Aleph Alpha?
So I don't know if I would ever start a third company, fourth, that would be. But I think there's a lot of opportunities. So I think current giant opportunity is generative AI quarterly reports app, because tons of money is wasted on that. But maybe I would also go back to making a lot more music.
Good. Christian, what company would you start if you had to?
What I would start, I think it's not the beauty of the AI space is it's not a winner takes all market, right? So for me right now, the foundation models are clearly one of the most robust ones. I would say.
You, Adam?
Yes. AI, if you don't know if it's good or not, isn't actually usable, it turns out. And so it's kind of like if I have a self-driving car that sometimes crashes, that's not really useful. So I think this sort of safety paradigm can be applied across all sorts of applications and will be.
Good. Yeah. Thank you, that's it.